Hey everyone, before we get to today's shows, I just want to ask you for your support. The UCAN Foundation has partnered with MoveOn.org to launch a petition that demands that Netflix and other reality shows put a disclaimer on the front of all unscripted shows. And that disclaimer says that all episodes are for entertainment purposes only, and any content can be edited, manipulated, and presented in any other way for storyline purposes. So please, if you can, check out the link in the description right here. Go add your name to support, and let's get this petition out to Netflix and start making some real change in the industry. Thank you for your support, and thank you for your signature. Now, let's enjoy the show.
But they say shame and guilt are honestly the most out of body. It's foreign. We don't want to feel it. We want to unzip our skin. That's the feeling of it. So we cope with it in a lot of different ways. And some people are shameless and they will, those are the people that, who those people are. Right. And then there's the people that are really disconnected from their shame. They don't even realize they have it.
Are you going through life blind? This is Eyes Wide Open with Nick Thompson. On this podcast, we share knowledge and stories that build human connection while elevating stigmatized societal issues such as mental health, holistic wellness, culture, free speech, and more, all to ensure we show up in the world with our eyes wide open. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of Eyes Wide Open. Before we get to today's guest, I want to invite you to please like, share, and subscribe to the show. Helps us in the algorithm. We've been doing really well lately, so I want to continue to grow the show, continue to share the message, help more people go through life with their eyes wide open. So appreciate that. But today's guest is Emma Demar, or AKA the Trendy Therapist. She's a licensed clinical social worker, former actress from Gossip Girl, believe it or not, a writer and a best-selling author of the book, The Truth Teller, The Truth Behind Our Masks. She also hosts a podcast by the same name. I wanted to have Emma on today because I have been doing the Shadow Work Journal workbook. Over the last year of my life, maybe a little bit long, actually the last year and a half now, my life it's been an uphill climb. And I've really wanted to go deeper into myself to figure out why I think the way I think on certain things or behave the way I behave on certain things. And so after I started doing this, I came across Emma, who wrote this book, which is basically about how to rediscover yourself and become your authentic self, and do that through inner work, inner peace, so that you can kind of show up in the world as your authentic self, which is one of my key ethos in life is to be unapologetically myself and do the work so you can go through life with your eyes wide open. So it felt like a very natural connection to make. And I've been reading her book for about a week now, and I'm in, I think it's chapter 6. My bookmark fell. Chapter 6, which is going to be the truth about positivity. But she talks previously in the book of the pieces I've read about grounding, unmasking, how to accept your own complexities, learning your inner truth, what being nice actually means, how it compares to kindness, including sharing her own journey of suffering from anorexia and as an eating disorder at the age of 16. So she's a very super cool person, very nuanced and very clear that she shows up on social media in this conversation and very likely in every other area of her life as a authentic version of herself. So I really hope that you enjoy this episode with Emma today. And I invite you to give her a follow as well at the Trendy Therapist, which is across social media platforms, or check the links in the bio. But I hope you sit back, you enjoy this episode. We get into a real authentic conversation about our life experiences and what it means to show up in the world as your true authentic self. Because when you show up as your true authentic self, you can go through the world with your eyes wide open. Today's guest is Emma Demar, aka that Trendy Therapist. Emma's a licensed clinic social worker. She's a former actress, writer. She's got a new best-selling book out called The Truth Teller, The Truth Behind Our Masks. And she also hosts a podcast called The Truth Teller. So thank you for coming on today. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you. It's my pleasure. I really enjoy your social media. And then I know I told you before we recorded, I got your book a week or so ago, and I am reading through it. There it is, The Truth Teller. And yeah, it's really fun because I am doing, and again, I said this, but like I'm doing some shadow workbook, trying to really, because I am actually pretty in touch with myself, but there's still things that I don't quite understand. So I just felt like this all kind of aligned at a good time
I
for
love when
me.
that
And
happens. Yeah.
it's like the universe is speaking to us. So
Synchronicities. That's what it is.
yeah,
Love
exactly.
that. Cool.
So, favorite question to start off, you already know it. What did you want to be when you were growing up? How did that change to where you are now?
Okay. Well, big surprise here. Actress is what I'm going to say because that's what I wanted to be growing up. How that changed basically is I tried out the acting thing. I did a little bit of that. And I went, basically, it all kind of culminated in I went to an intensive acting program in the city. And I kind of told myself, like, this is your last kind of like hurrah with this. Like, you're either going to go in this direction or not. I had gone to college and studied creative writing and like liberal arts kind of thing. And so I tried that after school. And I was like, I had a realization basically that it wasn't acting per se that I loved. It was more like being seen and getting my message across and connecting and being in different roles in people's stories that was interesting to me. And I had already taken a lot of psychology classes. Like that was already an interest of mine in college. And before that, I'm always like the kind of person that will be watching mental health documentaries and things like that. So that it was not a difficult thing to figure out from there what I wanted to pivot to. But yeah, it was kind of like a realization from that.
That's so cool. I had aspirations of being a filmmaker since I was a kid, and I had my this is it moment. Like you're going all in or
Yeah, it's a really important moment to have.
yeah, it really is. And I feel like did you do like theater? Did you do indie stuff?
I
Obviously.
did, yeah. Well, I did theater growing up, and then I kind of did more film and acting. And then when I was working with an agency, I would go out for like more so TV film because I singing is not my forte per se. So more so acting. So I would stick with that. Yeah.
Might have to make you sing a song just to
Oh
prove it.
God, no. I do love watching Broadway shows. I go to a lot of Broadway
Okay.
shows. Yeah.
That's nice. Very nice.
Yeah.
What was your sort of segue into wanting to become a therapist? What was the conduit that was like that? Okay, that's what I'm going to do. It's not going to be acting.
Yeah, I think it was a culmination of like, it was a lot of soul searching, honestly. I had a few years after college, after the acting program, where I was kind of like trying out different things. I was in HR and advertising, like completely unrelated. I really didn't know where I was going to land. And then I was like, in the back of my mind, I said, if all else fails, I'm going to go back to school to be a therapist because, again, it was a pivotal moment where I was really thinking about like, what intrinsically do I love? And I love helping people. I love using my own experiences. And I should say it goes back to in high school, I had anorexia. So I had an eating disorder in high school and I recovered from that. And I always kind of thought, because I always feel this way, that things happen for a reason. And so I kind of felt like I'm going to use this in some capacity in my life. And when I was doing the soul searching after school, I was like, I think that I want to use that to actually help other people with my own recovery story and like being that person other people could come to. And that's all that kind of led to I'm going to go back to school. And that's kind of where it was.
One of the things I think is super interesting, I've had several different types of therapists on the show, and it feels like everyone kind of has that personal experience that they have overcome or work really hard to overcome, and that kind of drives them to want to help other people that have experienced something similar.
Yeah. Yes. I think that's a commonality. I think because a lot of people that haven't been in therapy or done that kind of work, you're not necessarily drawn to it or you don't get it. So I think it takes a certain kind of individual, right, to like want to go that route. You're nodding, so I feel like you agree.
No, it's just it immediately made me think of my sisters being like, "Oh, you're in therapy?" Like it
Right.
was like what's wrong? And it's like sometimes nothing, and I go anyway.
I really think everyone should be in therapy. And I think that it's an advantage if you do and a disadvantage if you don't, honestly.
I couldn't have said it better myself. And I remember one of your podcasts, it was maybe a couple months ago,
Yeah.
what you were talking about your first experience in therapy, and you cried the whole time because you felt like you shouldn't have been there. So,
Well, because nobody that I knew, obviously I'm 13 years old, like nobody that I knew went to therapy. So the reason, and I talk about this in my book, but the reason that I went originally is because I had this friendship that like we had a falling out, which is very common at that age. And my mom was like, she saw me so distraught about it. And she said, I'm going to take you to this therapist. And I'm like, therapist? Like, why would I go there? Like, I don't need that. Why would I go there? So I went there and I felt complete like shame and embarrassment about being in that chair. I'm like, why? I thought something was wrong with me. And so I just cried the whole time. And looking back, it's honestly crazy that I'm on the other side of that, because I still do have people come to me that are like, this is my first time here. And I feel really a lot of shame. I think the narrative is changing, luckily.
I think so too, especially with our generation. I don't know how old you are. I assume we're close enough, but
Yeah,
our
30.
generation, yeah, we're kind of just saying, okay, forget it. Like, we got to overcome some of this trauma.
Right, thankfully, because, our parents, like in the boomers and things like that, they're really, no, we're paving a new way for it, which is great. It's good for our own, predecessor, our children.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. My first therapy experience was when I was like 21 years old. And I remember the shame. And I only went for a few months. And a lot of it was shame. Like, I would sneak, I was living, where was I living at the time? I think I was home. And I remember I would like sneak out and not say where I was going or lie about where I was going because I was so ashamed that I was doing it. Yeah.
So did you make the choice by yourself to go?
I was trying to figure out, I didn't even really know what it was. I grew up Catholic. So up until high school, I was very much, and I had my own challenges from a young kid, but I was very much just like taught God, trust in God's plan. If you put God first, everything will be fine. If you treat others well, everything will be fine. All of that stuff. So even learning what it was in high school, I didn't really understand what it was or how it worked. And I easily would I would say I actually thought it was psychiatry when I went to my first therapy session.
Yes, people get that confused all the time.
Yeah. And it was just, I think it was the way that psychiatrists were represented in movies and TV shows and stuff like that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And they're really different because psychiatrists obviously provide medication. We don't.
Exactly. So it was very interesting. And I just had like so much, but it was ironically funny enough. My friend, his name was Dave. He was like one of the most manly, masculine men that was in my like friend group. And he's the one that was like, hey, I did this, go try this place. I've done this before. Yeah. And because I kind of looked at him as someone who was a little bit stronger, both physically and mentally, that, yeah, like hearing it from him.
Kind of okay.
Exactly. So that was good. But
that's the thing. I mean, definitely reduces the stigma the more that we speak about it and, are open and reduce the shame around it. I think
that's exactly right.
Yeah.
One of the things that I read in your book, do you want to just give people an overview of the book, like a summary of what it's about?
Yeah. So I have it here, so I'll just hold it up. But yeah, the truth teller, the truth behind our mask. So obviously I wrote this during the pandemic, hence the mask reference, but basically it's about authenticity. Yes. But so like taking off our masks, but our figurative masks, the things that we kind of hide behind in order to shield ourselves from being our vulnerable selves in the world, which is obviously extremely difficult and scary. And many people never do that work. So it was during the pandemic that I kind of thought I want to write a book that speaks to people on a soul level and gets to their inner child and the root of things. And, I talk about social media and all the different kind of like positivity. I know you said you're on that chapter, but all the things that we hear about, the buzzwords that kind of separate us from our true selves and how to kind of get there. And like I obviously talk about my own personal journey towards reconnecting with myself after my eating disorder and just throughout different things in my life.
Yeah, I think so far it's really good because you kind of call out, and what do they say, like name it to tame it, right? You kind of like call out some things that I think we all know are obvious, but we are so distracted and the world's coming at us a million miles an hour that we can't even sit back and be like, hey, I'm scrolling on social media as a distraction, which is something you address.
I really like that you said that. And that's why I started with the chapter about silence and like getting rid of the noise. And it's because I felt like during the pandemic and just in life, we really never take that step back. And yeah, a lot of these things, like to somebody that maybe isn't so insightful about themselves, they might, oh yeah, obviously, but it's not so obvious when you really think deeply into it, because you're not living by that necessarily. You might know it, but it's another thing to really embody it.
I completely agree. One of the things that I know, so almost a year ago now, which kudos to me, back in December of last year, I shut off my social media notifications, which, I went from 343 followers posting a picture of my dog every 6 months to having 300,000 people follow me basically over the course of 3 weeks. Right. And so I wasn't on social media. I spent most of my time on LinkedIn, which was for my career. Different, and so, yeah, it is different. And no, people aren't mean on LinkedIn either. And not yet anyway. We'll see if it,
but yeah.
Yeah. So it was weird because it was so new for me. And then I didn't even realize like how much it was impacting me and how much it kind of got me, and the pressure of like, my publicist being like, you got to post this, this, and this, and you got to do this. And people want to know what you're doing. And I'm like, I'm working, I'm spending time with my friends and my family and I'm
just sitting here like watching TV. That's what I'm doing.
Right. It's not that exciting. So I do think, even little things like that people can do. So then it's on your time. So I go on Instagram, TikTok on my time. And usually I'm off at TikTok as quick as I'm on it. But
right. No, definitely limiting the amount of time, and also just like being aware of, like I say, like yourself when you're like, what are you looking at and how is it impacting you? Because we just kind of lose sight of ourselves when we're looking at these things, and then we don't check in. So checking in before and after, and just kind of being aware of our mental state and how that's changing when we're looking at things.
That's so true. That's so true. Do you think that, so you do say like social media is a distraction. Do you think people at some subconscious level know that they're kind of distracting themselves from their issues, their true purpose? You talk about that a lot too, the true purpose.
Obviously it depends on the person and how self-aware they are, but there are a lot of people that know it. And again, just because you know something doesn't mean you're going to automatically change it, but awareness is always the first step. So if you have that, you're on to a good start.
Yeah. So when you talk to your clients or your social media following or whomever it is, like, where do you tell people to start? Because that's the thing. It's like I joke and I say I was meandering through life in my 20s. I was like, I knew I had some issues. I knew I was very reactive, which comes from my family. I knew I was suffering from depression. I diagnosed myself with about 16 other things throughout the years too. But it was like,
yourself is always fun, right?
Oh yeah, it is. I mean, I went through, ADHD, BPD, anything bipolar disorder, anything you can imagine. I was like, that's what I got.
That's what it is. That's the answer to my problem.
Yeah, exactly. And it was really just that I wasn't comfortable in my own skin. I knew who I was kind of at the core, but I didn't know like how to show up in the world that way. So like, what do you look at like that? How do you help people? Where do they start?
I mean, you can start at all angles, right? Like sometimes people come in and it's like physical symptoms. And they're like, I don't know why I'm feeling this way. And what we call that is somatization. It's the manifestation of, your emotional issues into physical symptoms. So they might come in and they're like, I have a headache, I have migraines, I have gastrointestinal issues. And then we end up talking. It's usually honestly that they'll come in and it's about one thing and then it's not about that very soon after that. And that's what I love about this work is it really evolves. But a lot of times it's like, I keep having this argument with my significant other, and they'll be really adamant about like, that's what I'm here for. And that's it. It's all I want to talk about. That's it. And then
all interconnected.
Yeah. And exactly. Everything is connected. And I think when they start to realize that is when the work really happens, because then we get to the heart of the issue. And they see these same patterns that they're cycling through in all these different arenas of their life, and we piece it all together. That's also my favorite part too. have a lot of favorite parts of this, but like
It's like all your favorite part.
like connecting the dots, and like then they're the aha moments, and then they become more and more of themselves throughout the process.
That's so true. I had a couple aha moments that stick with me in my therapy journey, and one of them, it's funny. It just came up the other day in conversation where, so I started going because I was having relationship troubles when I went the second time. I was going because I was having relationship troubles. Turns out most of them were about me. So that's that's the power of putting in the work there. But one of the things she said to me, she's like, you kind of grew up in this, as being isolated, right? Like I kind of had to handle my own problems. I was the oldest. My parents were divorced. I kind of took a lot of it on, and so it's like my defense mechanism, the avoidant, is that I withdraw and I'm like, I will take care of this myself. If I'm struggling, I will figure it out. I don't need anybody else and all that stuff. So when you start to like realize like where that comes from, like you said, the inner child, and where that like shadow work comes from, and what's actually going on, and why you actually feel the way you feel, where it stems from.
It's a beautiful thing. And then you go back to childhood, like you said, and the attachment style, and there's all these different layers to it. I also study the Enneagram, which I don't know if, are you familiar with
I'm familiar with it and I've heard about it, but I haven't done it. I'm
Okay.
a big Myers-Briggs proponent though.
Okay. That's, I mean, it's similar, it's a different thing. So obviously, like automatically I start to think about like, what type are you? Because it's something that, and I use it with my clients all the time, but
do you mind explaining what it is?
yeah. So it's a personality typing system consisting of, I mean, there's 9 core types and 27 different subtypes. But basically, it's a way to kind of figure out your starting point. Like, what are the things what are your strengths? What are your blind spots? And so there's different types. Like the one is the perfectionist. I don't know for sure, but I think you might be a 5.
And what's that one?
Okay, so when you said avoidant, that was a big one. And also, you're somebody I think that really likes to learn. I could see it. Like, yeah. So read about I'll send you some stuff, but
yeah. That's so cool.
Great. Yeah. That has added a whole different layer to things. And I started to learn about that during the pandemic too. And it will tell you a lot about like how you respond to things. And it's fascinating. I don't know how I got to that right now, but
I mean, I got into a lot of stupid shit, and this isn't even stupid. Yours is cool. I got into a lot of stupid shit during the pandemic.
Well, stupid too, right? It has to be a combination.
Right.
The pandemic was a whole different. I think it was a great opportunity though for everyone to really like figure some shit out.
So it's interesting you say that, because I was going to say this before and then we got sidetracked. I'm introverted, and I kind of felt like I was built for it. At the beginning. Of course, it got to everyone at some point, but
right.
At the beginning,
this is good.
Yeah. Like, I'm totally cool not seeing or talking to anyone for 2 weeks.
And then you're like, fuck.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And it was probably around that 6 to 8 week mark where I'm just like, this isn't working for me anymore.
I know. That's when the dip hit, and you're like, this is not a joke. This isn't a vacation. This is like, we're trapped in here and we're with ourselves, and we have to, like, you can't escape it anymore. So everyone's prior coping mechanisms of like, I got to book this trip. I got to do, I mean, some people still found ways around it, but
that $17 flight to Italy, that was a meme.
Oh yeah. Or go down to Miami where, people are still partying without their masks on.
Right.
There were loopholes, but for the most part, yeah, we were stuck, and we had to really like sit with ourselves in the silence of our own thoughts.
Yeah. And I had people close to me that really thrived, like you said, on those social interactions, on those being in the office, on the happy hours, on the weekend plans, at the vacations and the trips and all of that. And I know a couple people that literally like feels like they had a mental breakdown, developed symptom of anxiety, all of this stuff, which is
all the things came to the surface.
Yes, exactly. That we're like already in there when you take the structure away. And I talk a lot about structure in my personal journey, because that's another big journey of mine, was like, I need structure. So I'm introverted, but like that means that I need A, B, and C to do this, and I need something to kind of look forward to, and all of that to keep my mind from going inside too much.
So is that something that like during the pandemic, did you create the structure, or was it,
So I actually had done the structure earlier. So my therapist and I, like, she's like, well, we should try putting some structure in. So it was like every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday night after work, I would go to hot yoga. Then it would be Wednesdays would be my watch a movie night or whatever. Like I just started putting this structure in, and it, of course I broke it sometimes, but it was the default was I'm going to hot yoga on these days.
Yeah, I'm like that too. Like it's not my natural inclination to like, I'm not like, I'm going to wake up at this time and do like, I actually really go opposite of that. I don't like it, but it's good for me. And I've learned to really implement, like you said, some of those things where it's like a loose structure. It's not so rigid where, you know, I don't think that's necessarily the best either, but a loose structure is good.
Yeah, exactly. I don't like getting up in the morning. So I do a very, very loose morning structure.
Right, me too. I keep it loose in the morning with like, you know, wake up, yeah, whatever. I mean, I think it's nice to have certain things, but when you become too rigid with anything, I think it becomes a problem.
Well, then you become OCD and a perfectionist, and all of that stuff starts to impact.
Right. And then you overly rely on that to the detriment of other things. I mean, it's good to be flexible in ways and be able to be spontaneous when need be.
Right. And I think that's like flexibility. And you talk about complexity in the book too, or at least as far as I am, where you say things about people accepting their complexities, how it helps you sort of understand other people. It helps you understand yourself. What do you feel people should be doing about their own internal complexities?
I think that we don't embrace them enough because we're not introspective enough about our own complexities. We're not really interested in our nuances. And that's what I try to talk about a lot in the book, because I think we categorize people way too easily. Like this is this kind of person, whether they're nice or they're this or that. And we put them into these groups of people, and then we lose the connections that we can make individually with other people because we're not seeing them for who they are.
Yes.
And that's something that, I mean, again, I'm going to send you the Enneagram. I'm a 4, and that's the individualist. So I think it comes from me feeling unseen about like my own complexities and like all the things that I have to offer, because somebody might just label me as like, you know, you're mean or you're this or you're that, like whatever it is. You look
or
like
you're a TikTok influencer.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, or for me, you were just that idiot on a reality show. Like that's
like no, and you don't have to lead with that because you're a person that was on a reality show and you have a 360 life and person that you are.
Yeah, which is so weird because people, I don't want to get into, I've talked enough about reality TV for the rest of 17 lives, but
I'm sure you're very sick of it. Yeah.
The very difficult thing that was for me to navigate in that, and this is where I had to kind of like start rethinking and doing the shadow work. And I even wrote a guided journal based on what I was doing, which I'll pop now too. Awesome. Yeah, it's called Rebuilding You. But
love
that was the thing where it was like I always had like a small group of friends. We're all doing okay. We support each other. And it really barricaded me from a lot of the outside world in a sense of what going on a reality show and having social media and doing all of this opens up a world that I didn't know was as difficult as it turned out to be. And so what I realized is I became, quote, famous for my relationship. And what you see on these shows, I'm sure you know this, but what you see is like such little tidbits of what's actually going on in people. And I have a lot of nuance. Like I have a lot of things that I believe that contradict each other, just like everybody else. Yeah. Right. And I didn't get to have any of that nuance. And it's funny because now when the nuance comes out or people listen to this show or people see something I post on social media, there, you know, how many messages I get, they're like, stick to reality TV. Then when I talk about reality TV, people are like, stop talking about reality TV. So it's like, it's, yeah.
What? Because they saw you in this one very narrow lens and they want to keep you in that lens because that's what we automatically do. But that would drive me nuts.
Oh, it drives me nuts.
Because I would just want to over explain things, which is something I've worked on, is like, I don't need to explain everything, although I'm very expressive and want my truth to be known. I don't need to over explain it. But I think there's a fine line. And like, I think it's good to at least walk your truth and know what it is. And that's the difficult thing, is like there's going to be the people that are like, well, that's like, I just had this really funny situation happen. It's a short story, but I'm somebody that like used to always post like birthday posts on Instagram.
Wait for yourself.
No.
Oh, for like your friends. Yeah. Like, oh, happy birthdays. Yeah.
To it. I didn't do it recently because I've started to like evolve as I grow, and I don't, post as much, which is great. We should all grow and evolve. And someone was like, are you okay with this person? Because you didn't, and I'm like, this concept, because you think that I'm just like a social media person, that I love it, but that's not necessarily the case. And I'm going to grow, and I'm going to change my relationship with social media as I grow, as everyone should. That's one example of it.
I think that's a really, really good example, especially for you, who you have a TikTok presence, you have a Instagram presence, but at the same time, and this is actually something that really bothers me, and it's really impacted some of my other friends that are therapists, and they're on social media. The whole concept of like, you're breaking rules or HIPAA or violating the APA, all that stuff. What are your thoughts on that, actually, before I...
Yeah, I mean, because that was definitely something early on when I started out, that, a lot of people aren't on social media. So there's a lot of therapists that don't have to think about that. But for me, I definitely used it. So there was a lot of like questioning of how much I can post or not. And then I was just like, I'm me across the board. Like I'm not going to, how I show up here is like how I show up in therapy. Like I'm me, and I use myself. Exactly. That's the authentic, the consistency of being. I'm not going to show up with this mask and then be whatever. So I just decided like I need to have an outlet, and I'm not going to do your typical like self-care post every second. Like I'll do my own, like I like to do my inspirational posts, and what I do on there. But I think that's what I've done to remain true to myself. It's like I found my niche within this sphere. And that's what I would say to anybody that's trying to be on social media, that's in therapy or any space, is like, it doesn't have to look a certain way, and you can change it and you can evolve it, and you should.
100%. And that's another thing that I kind of had to learn through this whole process, because it was to the point where I was like getting so stressed out about, I was supposed to, when I think back, and it meant well, right? Like capitalize on your 15 minutes or whatever. But it was like, post your mental health tips, share your journey, share your DIY stuff. Yeah. And I'm super active in my community and in politics and all that stuff. Like I love politics. It's a hobby. It's a unhealthy hobby, I would imagine sometimes, but
it could be worse.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's like, and then, don't talk too much about that, because you're going to divide people. I'm like, this is what I talk about. This is what I force people to listen to me talk about. So, but it got to the point where I'm just like, you know what? I'm going to post when I want to post. I'm going to post what I want to post. And that's just how it's going to be.
That's the best. Because there's always going to be people that have something to say about it. But like, I'm just thinking, this is for when you're on my podcast, but I have like other things that I want to ask you about, because I know that there's been things that you've talked about, like that maybe aren't the popular opinion, like somebody maybe talking about you that's in a different like Bachelor Nation or something like that. And that you can leave this in or out. But the point is, like, I thought that was admirable that you did that despite people saying you shouldn't do that.
Well, thank you. And I appreciate that. And you can ask anything, and we can rehash it or ask later too.
Yeah. I thought that was great, because it's something that like I would definitely do. I saw myself in you in that. I was like, I would say that. And it's not the popular thing to say.
Do you mind me asking? Like, I feel like I've done that several times over the last 2 years.
Oh, like the Nick files.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah.
That was the thing and of course, like I know who that is. So it was like, oh, that's interesting. And I didn't know about that. And I'm like, damn, it sucks.
Yeah, I get messages anytime. I'm just like, dude, the guy won't talk to me anymore. And it's funny because we used to, we weren't friends, but exchange DMs. Like next time he was in Chicago, we were going to grab a drink. Yeah, friendly. He was going to send me a copy of his book. Never got it, but he was supposed to. But then to be like, you want to talk about me and you don't want to talk to me.
You.
And that's my number one thing.
Because then you don't really have an issue with you. You just want to use it as whatever you're trying to say.
Right. Well, in his case, whether he got the directive or he did it himself, he has access to episodes of reality shows before they air. He has access to cast members for the first interview post whatever chaos happens. So I understand that he's got to protect his income and he's got to protect his access.
Right.
Don't agree. I would not do that, but it's fine. But then to sit there and like call me a motherfucker,
Immature. That's
right, or say that I'm starting a not-for-profit because I'm trying to get famous. It's like, dude, no one ever got famous for starting a not-for-profit.
That's true. Point blank. Not what you're going to go to if you want to be famous, for sure.
Right, exactly.
But I think also your social media presence, like you're very genuine with it, I find. Like I'm curious, and I'll ask you when you come on my podcast, like how you got into the mental health aspect, but just in general, like overview, definitely seems like, as you said, you post when you want, when you have something to say, which it seems like you found your groove.
Yeah, and that's all it is. And that's what I would say to anyone. That people get stressed out about social media, guilty too, okay? But at the same time, it's like, it's your social media. And you talk about this where you're like, what you see on social media isn't real. And for me, I want to be real on social media because I want the person, like you said earlier, when you're on this show, when you're in therapy, when you're with your clients, when you're meeting your friends, family, whatever it is, you want to be yourself. And that isn't always easy. And that's something that I'm really proud of myself for maintaining my authenticity through all of this, because there was a lot of pressure from a lot of different areas. But what I think is the most interesting part is that when you step back and you're just like, it is what it is on social media. And I get there's like a hustle now to find a way to like make money or make a side hustle or whatever. And that's fine. But when you start stressing yourself out about that, you're giving yourself unnecessary stress. Just do it on your own time and you're going to have a more authentic following.
Right. That's how I found my following, was really like, I wasn't looking, I intentionally don't look at what other people post. And I feel bad saying that sometimes because I'm like, it's not that I'm not rooting for you or like other therapists I connect with, I'll look at it sometimes, but I really try not to because of, I want to be as authentic to myself as possible. And so then you source from within, right? You're not just copying or regurgitating.
Well, I think that's what's so interesting about you on social too, is I read it and I'm like, yeah, that I felt like I knew you before we even hopped on today or DM'd before. And that's what I think is so cool, because if you do, and there's plenty of people, like there's other people, I'm not going to name names, but other people from other reality shows that have podcasts or whatever, or show up in certain ads and all that stuff. And I'm just like, who are you? Like, do you know? And I almost, I don't want to say I pity them, but in a sense, I'm like, you know what? I look back at the last year and a half. I didn't do anything out of character, and I'm proud of that. But like, I look and it's like, I didn't push products and brands that I don't believe in. I didn't do any of that. And it's so easy to get caught up, but I just
really easy. That's what I was going to say. It's like, that's the easy route. It's much harder to deny all of that and just remain true to yourself throughout that. So like, the fact that you did that, you really should be so proud of that.
Well, thank you. And then you talk about inner truth too. Like, when did you learn your inner truth? Because I just from what you've said, it sounds like it's kind of been a work in progress. And I think obviously something because of the book, but you probably figured it out before that. But what was that like moment for you where you learned what your inner truth and your purpose was?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is that it is inherent in me that I want to know my truth and live by my truth. That is just a characteristic of somebody with my personality type. Again, the 4, I'll say. But my journey with it is like, I did go through, I think I'm also somebody that like everything that happens to me, I really take a step back and evaluate why it happened. And I integrate whatever I learned into moving forward. That is how I operate. So, which is really helpful too, because like I feel everything and I do it in the moment and then I can move on. With my eating disorder, that I guess like looking back at the truth stuff, like that was when I was most disconnected from it, of course, because I was numbing myself out and I was not being my full self. And through my recovery is when I really felt like I was reconnecting with my inner child who was there all along, but I had neglected. And then I really started to do that work of reconnecting with like what makes me feel like me and what did I lose along the way and why, and like what were these messages that I had internalized. And that's when you start to shed yourself from that, and then you're just left with the core of who you are. So it's a process, but like if you can, it takes a lot of introspection, and I think it goes back to childhood. It really always does.
Right. Well, your behavior in life is learned from that age when you're just so influential, right? And at the time, you don't know, right? You have no idea what's going on. You're just trying to
You're just,
get
because
through it.
that's the whole thing. Like, you're just uninhibited and you're yourself, like when you're a child. And that's honestly the best case study for me is watching my home videos.
Oh,
We have
really?
a bunch of home videos. My dad was really good with that. I'm so grateful for that. And I'll look back and like, I'm like dancing and prancing around. Like, I'm looking at me like that's, and no shame. Right. And it's powerful to watch that. And I think that people could learn a lot from looking at whether it's a picture or just like old writings or anything if you have from the past.
That's so interesting. I would love to read my high school journals.
You should if you have
I
them.
don't know. They might be in my closet, but I'm also like, do I really want to
Dig them up.
read me talking about all my crushes that I was too afraid to talk to?
Right. I mean, like the content is going to be cringe, but you'll find gems in there of just like, even just like the way you think, right? Like, oh, wow, I was like really harping on this one thought pattern, or like this was like something that I didn't realize that I kept going back to. Learn a
So
lot.
true. That's actually a really good point. That's very true. What I wanted to ask you was you talk a little bit about like OCD and perfectionism and stuff like that. Was that something that started because you were putting on, the performances at a young age that eventually maybe led you to feeling the or developing the eating disorder?
Okay. Yeah. So the eating disorder was first, the OCD was after. And those two things are comorbid. They're things that occur commonly, like the gene is linked. So within people, a lot of times if they have the eating disorder, they'll have OCD, vice versa. So for me, when I started to recover from the eating disorder is when the OCD started to become more pronounced because I wasn't numbing it anymore. I don't remember having any OCD when I was a child or before the eating disorder, but after I really did. So that's how those two things were linked. Perfectionism for me, I would say, I don't know if it's linked to, I think it's kind of pervasive, right? It's like I want to be my best and I'm hard on myself if I'm not, right? I think that's where it shows up for me. But yeah, with the OCD, it was more so after that. And I still deal with OCD. It's something that because it waxes and wanes throughout your life, unfortunately.
And I have a little bit of it too. It used to be much worse, but I have a little bit of it too. It's weird the way it manifests itself. Sometimes it's like the littlest stupid thing. Like I literally like moved, my phone was sitting here on my wallet when we were talking a few minutes ago, and I noticed it and I just moved it off my wallet so it would be flat. Why? Because I didn't want it to be
Right.
cluttered.
And that's the thing that
It's
people don't get about. Like you can be in a room with somebody and like people won't know that you have OCD, right? Like, but you think of it, it's just portrayed so ridiculously of like, oh, it's got a clean, organized house. Like not necessarily. It could be completely opposite. It could be about cleanliness. It could be about symmetry. It could be about, I've had people that have come to me with OCD that have like thoughts of pedophilia, like just different things that are like so perverse because, and that's the thing, it's the shame in it. And that's why it's an intrusive, unwanted thought that you want to push out. It could be anything.
Why do you think we have so much shame? Now, and the reason I ask that is because I told you I come from Catholic, so that's the foundationally that is shame. So, like there, but it seems to be this general thing that we have in our society. And I've traveled the world to several other countries and stuff, and others have it, but it's different here.
I think the way we deal with it is different. I think we all have it fundamentally as part of like guilt, shame, fear, like these core sort of feelings. But they say shame and guilt are like honestly the most out of body, like it's foreign. We don't want to feel it. We want to unzip our skin. Like that's the feeling of it. So we cope with it in a lot of different ways. And some people are shameless and they will, those are the people that, who those people are. Right. And then there's the people that are really disconnected from their shame. They don't even realize they have it. So yeah, it's important to develop a healthy relationship with it. And we trace it back. Like when you were younger, like what were you able to talk about your feelings, and was it shameful to speak out or be yourself? We all have shaming stories that we've had over time.
It's so true. One of the other things that just popped in my head from your book that I wanted to talk about, because this is something I've dealt with my whole life.
Okay.
Being nice, being the nice guy, being this, being
Love
that.
topic, of course.
And what really stuck out to me is, and again, I don't have the freaking
Post-its.
Yeah, the Post-its. So it was something about when you're being nice, it's not actually kindness unless your motivation is to be kind. Something
Yes,
to that extent.
correct. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I feel like people are nice, but behind it's very rarely coming from the good place. Now, I do think that it's the opposite too. Sometimes people are not nice, and maybe they have good intentions. And I always try. I kind of pride myself in this. It's also not always the best thing. I try to look at people and judge them on their intentions, not their actions necessarily, or their.
Oh, it's hard, but that's the way to go.
Yeah, yeah. But what nice kindness? Walk me through that. What do
Oof.
you?
I mean, I, because I think I had to write about it because I mean, there's just a lot of people that, as you know, that are just like, we say they're nice. And I guess because of my personal experiences with those people and recognizing the hard way that they weren't actually nice through and through and it was not genuine, I sort of I thought it was important to talk about because I don't think that we think about it and we just again we group people together like, well, if you do this action, if you hold the door open, you're nice. No, I mean maybe you're just because there's intentions, right? And that's the thing about like personality types. It's like you might be doing that because you want to do the right thing, or because you're that's the role you're playing that day, not necessarily because you genuinely care about somebody. And it's dangerous to assume that because then you think you're surrounded by all these nice people, but like maybe not. Maybe their intentions are not that way. So I think it's important to differentiate and, like you said, look at the intentions below the surface, which are not always so easy to see. But I think over time, that's more so if you have a relationship with this person and over time you can really tell from through conversations and like just are their actions consistent and where do they come from and are they able to tell you when like things that are not so agreeable. That's also nice. That's also, I mean, that's kind. You don't want a bunch of yes men around you. That's not what's in your best interests.
That's actually a really good point. And sometimes being kind is challenging someone to think in a different way or push them to do something differently. And that's a very, very good point. I had not thought of that.
That's the kind of friend I try to be, and family member, whatever, but like that I try to be is like giving the truth. It could be a hard truth, but I'm going to tell it to you because other people might not. And that's nice. That's kind. That's genuine. And that will help you. I'm not just going to tell you what you want to hear.
Right. What do you think about people being labeled as nice? Like how should they take that? Because like I said, I've been the nice guy and I've been through when I was younger, more so than the last, few years, but the girls want to date a bad boy or they want to date someone who's like, you're super nice or
Right.
there's so many different things I could say, but like the nice guy, the nice girl next door, however you want to label it. What do you do when you get the label?
You have to think about what it means to you. Like, I think some people do feel like it's a sense of pride. Like they're like, I'm the nice guy and that's what I want to be. And if you cling so hard to that label, there's something more to it. Like, why is that what you're trying to be? And is there a reason? And was that because that's how you were growing up and you want to keep it that way because you're afraid to be anything else? Like, are there fears behind it? What are the underlying factors? So you might be like that, or you might not like it. Like you said, it might be like the nice guy doesn't get the girl. So then then it's a different story. Then you want to maybe become a little bit more spontaneous and spunky. I don't know.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. That's a very good point. And it's funny because I listened to my friend's podcast the other day with Case Kenny, and he was talking a little bit about that. And I was like, and he's turned it into like his superpower. He's like, I don't think I'm being a nice guy. He's like, I used to scoff at it, but he's like, I'm actually just mature. It's like, I'm mature. I know what I want. I know how to communicate what I want, and I know how to take feedback and all of that stuff. And he's yes. And it was just kind of like, oh, that's interesting. And then I read this last night and it was like, oh, wow, this is all kind of coming together.
Right. I think like the maturity thing is a good piece too, of like you kind of grow out of wanting to just be seen as this one thing. Hopefully, some people don't, but as you grow, I think like whatever you were labeled as when you were younger, like you have a different relationship to that growing up if you're introspective about it.
That's very true. In your book, and again, I haven't finished it, but the whole theme is the truth behind our masks. So what when someone does the work, and by the way, it's not something that happens over a couple of days or a couple of therapy sessions or even in therapy. A lot of it,
Right,
I think it was
right.
my therapist that says 10% of what we do here is the work, 90% or something like that is you outside of this office. Yeah, something like that. I don't know if I remember the numbers right or if that's a real study or whatever, but what is life like for you, but also for clients when you work with them and other people can do if they actually pull off the mask to reveal their true, authentic self?
For me, I feel the pressure's off. Like I don't have to be anything that I'm not. I can show up to any relationship, to any room as myself. And I don't have to think about like what's the right thing to say or what do I not like, how do I want to show up here? I get, it's relaxing. Honestly, it's a great thing. It's a lot of inner peace. And I feel very aligned. I use that word a lot too. Like it just very aligned in terms of like what I stand for, who I am. I have a strong sense of self, which I think, and I guess what I would say too is like, I think other people say that I make people feel more comfortable being their selves, like because I'm just spontaneous in my speech or whatever it is. I don't hide those little nuances that I think with the mask we do because we're more not ourselves. We're more artificial when we're wearing our mask. So
Well, and there's a piece, and it is the inner piece, right? To be able to not stress about showing up, whether that's social media, real life, or whatever. And that was one thing, I used to joke, oh, I'm unapologetically myself. And it's like, it's not a joke. I actually am. And you can take it or leave it. Like I know that I'm a good person. I know I'm doing the best that I can. And I know I have the best intentions. So if you don't like that, that's okay. And that's another thing I think I learned through this whole experience the last few years is people don't really know what to do with someone who's authentic if they can't relate to being authentic. And so they like label you and they try to shove you in this identity that they've created for you. And it's really
it's
just like
very threatening to
crazy.
people.
Yeah.
Yes. If you are not somebody that's introspective, like it's like speaking a different language and they won't get it. And that's difficult. That's obviously like, then you feel misunderstood or you feel like you need to explain yourself. And it's like, but again, if you just remain true to who you are, like you'll realize it really does not have to do with you when people have those reactions.
No, I totally agree. I think too, what I see, and it's funny because there's a couple things that are funny. One is people still DM me asking for dating advice, which I think is,
Do you
which
give?
is funny. I mean, if I think I have something to contribute, sure. But it's like
Yeah.
went on a reality TV show because I didn't meet anyone in real life that was working out.
Right, right. So you're like an expert all of a sudden.
Right. Got married, then got divorced, and
Right.
it was
Would you ask?
like,
Yeah.
right, like I don't know if I'm qualified to give you advice about your
Like
boyfriend.
people not thinking in nuance enough. They're just like dating show equals I can ask him a dating question. No, think about it a little deeper. Like what was his exact experience with it?
Yeah. But it is funny too because people do ask for self care advice and stuff like that. And that's one thing too I learned in therapy is like I was putting everybody before myself, and then at the end of the day, there's like nothing left. And I think that's something too with the like being nice, right? You could transition to a people pleaser, and then all of a sudden you're pleasing everybody else, and nobody's pleasing you. And I I don't believe that. I believe that if you're not putting yourself first, no one's putting you first. And I think that's such a important caveat to put on that.
Yes, you have to fill your own cup first. Absolutely. Otherwise, you're depleted and you have no source to pull from. And then it's not genuine, right?
And once again, comes back to
Comes
that, right?
right back around.
Comes right back to that. That's really
Yeah.
great. So one last thing I want to ask you, and then I'll turn it over and you can ask me anything. There was another quote that I did bookmark. It's the one that I bookmarked.
Nice.
And it is the truth about the noise is that you'll get lost in it if you aren't highly attuned to your own voice.
Mm-hmm.
What do you mean by that?
That if you're not connected to the inner voice, the voice that we all have within, then you will be swept up in things that they don't speak to you, that aren't for you, and you'll be lost and you'll feel disconnected. So the key is tuning in. That's really the starting point and the end point.
I love it. And I just wanted to I thought about just reading that, but I wanted to get you to elaborate on it because I think That is so important. There's noise everywhere. And one of you turn on the TV and it's like World War III is breaking
Oh,
out. You open up social media and everybody's commenting on it. And and that's just the
everywhere.
last 2 weeks. Yeah, that's just the last 2 or 3 weeks or whatever. So
Yep.
it is like the noise. And as someone who follows that stuff, like can I can relate to like, wanting to see it and stuff, but it's just there's so much noise everywhere we go. And if isn't that, you're getting hit with advertisements everywhere you go. And then you're getting, distracted by gossip, distracted by, and I love entertainment too, but it can be a distraction, right? It's
Of course. Yeah.
yeah.
And it takes a lot of intentionality and discernment to be like, should I be consuming this? Do I need to consume this? Where am I at with this? Is it too much information or not? Because there is such a thing as too much.
Totally agree. And so that one just really resonated with me because of the state of the world right now. And I wanted
Oh
to say
yeah.
that.
Oh yeah. Cool.
It's cool. Well, let me turn it over to you. Is there anything you want to ask me? I know we're going to hopefully do your podcast
Yes,
soon.
and I have a lot of questions for you, but one I really wanted to ask. So, like, I know that since the show, and it's really cool. You've been doing a lot of work on yourself. So, I just kind of wanted to know, like, is there anything that stands out that you've learned about yourself through the process?
Whew, okay. You're going
It's a big question. I know.
hot.
But
Yeah.
there we go.
There's a couple that I think are worth sharing. One, I have done, as I mentioned, a lot of work on myself. I used to be very reactive, very anxious, very, and I love this and I hate it, but I am so good at the one-line zingers to people, and I had to train myself to like not be an asshole back, not to let the sarcasm, because I would be able to hurt someone and sting them to the point where they would be frozen because I get to know people, right? So I know.
You know the place it's going to hurt.
Yes, exactly. So these are all things that I like learn behaviors on how to handle this reactiveness, the sarcasm, all of this stuff. And then when my whole life started falling apart about a year ago, I realized that like I had healed, but that was still in me. And so I was finding myself developing anxiety again, and different and worse, like the physical symptoms, which you mentioned earlier. I started gagging and puking when I would think about certain things, or I would see, I had to shut off all my news alerts and block because they would just show up in my news feed. Not, let alone my name. Just it would be like it would make me physically ill to see the new season was starting, like all of that stuff. And these are like any stress I've had before on steroids. Like these were new things. And then I realized like I wanted to be reactive. Like I was sick of playing nice with all of these things and all of these people that were judging me and that were smearing me in some cases, defaming me in other cases, or even the like the Nick Vile stuff we mentioned. That was a real moment for me because I had, for the last 6 months before that happened, I had really realized like I am still capable of this reactive, unhealed, angry, irritated person. And so I've learned that that's still in me, and that I can't just act like I'm a different person now. I have to actively work every single day to maintain that, because if I don't focus on that, it'll be stripped away very quickly. So that was like one of the biggest things. And when I, what did I want to do when the Nick Vile commentary came out? I wanted to be like, dude, you went on 52 seasons of The Bachelor because all you cared about was being famous and all of this stuff, and just like go at him as a person.
It's easy to do.
Yes. And that's what, oh my God, people would have loved it. I would have probably gained 30,000 followers.
Yeah, 1,000%.
Right. But then I remember, because this was a test for me, because I had been reactive on other things. And I was like, okay, I'm like, what am I feeling right now? I'm feeling angry that he's calling me out, and I'm feeling angry that I'm polarizing because I'm trying to help people. Okay, what do you do with that? And I'm like, well, you make it about the issue. And what is the issue? Well, the issue is that he won't talk to me, and he won't hear my perspective, and he's telling me what it is, and he's telling other people what it was, and I'm the only one that lived my experience. So talk about that. So it was like, that was so hard.
But like, that's awesome, Nick. Like,
Yeah. Well,
seriously,
thank you.
like that's the work. That's it.
Yeah. And I thought I lost it. And so that was a good moment for me of like, you haven't lost it. It's just like muscle memory, right? If you're not using the muscle,
It's like it's over and over again, right? And it does get easier, but it's a process with these things. But like, it's the coming back to it. That's the work, and you doing that. So that's awesome.
and then the other big one I learned is I'm resilient. I'm more resilient than I thought. And one of the things that I learned again in therapy was like, I am resilient. I have been through a lot and I have done a lot of things alone and I always come out on top. And, I think about like, I lost my job a year ago, divorce, public, getting just, lambasted by people on the internet and social media, even to the point where it happens. Once I started the foundation, it all started again. And it was like all sorts of tactics to like publicly humiliate me or make me look inept. And it was, I'm like, you know what? I can fucking handle taking on big reality TV because of everything I've done before this and because I'm resilient. And if I didn't know I was resilient, I would have just gone back and lived my life, normal life, and said, forget it. It's other people's problem now, not mine. So the resiliency is something I'm still figuring that out, because I have moments a couple months ago where I'm like, this is awful. Why am I doing this to myself? Even my therapist was like, what's your exit plan? Like, you're putting yourself in these situations where the media is now smearing you. They're trying to paint you as an entitled reality star. And it's like all this stuff, which is just not true. And even she said at some point recently, I'm proud of the way that you've handled this and the way that you've explained why this is important and why you're doing it and how you compartmentalize it. And so just the resiliency, and I can go on and on, but the resiliency is way stronger than I thought. And what I would say to others listening is, you're resilient too. You're more resilient than you think. And you may not feel that right now, but you can handle almost anything. And if you can't, just know there's resources out there and people that are willing to help you.
Amen.
Amen.
I love it. Yeah, resilient for sure. And I love that. I think that's commendable, and like, you should be really proud of that. And again, everything happens for a reason. So these are things you've learned that you take with you from the experience.
Right. And thank you for that. Yeah. So let people know where they can find you. And we'll, of course, put all those links in the description too.
Yes. So that Trendy Therapist on Instagram, the Truth Teller podcast. You can get my book, Truth Teller.
Highly recommend.
Thank you very much. And yeah, I think that's where you can find me.
Awesome. You're on TikTok too, right?
I'm on TikTok too. Yes,
same thing. Okay. All those links are in the bottom. That's what matters. Thank you so much for joining today. I really enjoyed this.
Having me. Great conversation.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Thank you for joining us on this week's episode of Eyes Wide Open. If you enjoy the show, the best way to support us is by sharing or dropping a review. For more information and content, check out engagewithnick.com or find me on Instagram at nthompson513. Don't go through life blind. Do the work so you can show up in the world with your eyes wide open.